It started as just another quiet morning on the edge of a forested suburb in Oregon. The birds were chirping, the air was crisp, and a small French bulldog named Leo was sniffing around the creek behind his owner's cabin. But within seconds, peace turned into panic. A desperate splash, tiny cries for help. A rabbit, barely visible, struggling in the icy current, fighting for its life. Most dogs would have barked and backed away, but not Leo. What he did next shocked everyone. And just when his owner thought the story was over, something happened that no one could explain. Something that changed their lives forever. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Now let's go back to the moment Leo jumped into the water and find out why his courage wasn't just about saving a life, but unlocking a secret. Nestled at the edge of the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, surrounded by towering evergreens and a whispering breeze that carried the scent of pine, the cabin had always been a place of quiet healing for Nora Bennett. After stepping away from a demanding job as an emergency nurse, she sought peace in solitude, bringing only the essentials, and her one constant companion, Leo, a small, muscular French bulldog with sandy-colored fur and a heart far bigger than his compact frame. Leo had a habit of patrolling the property every morning. He'd sniff the moss-covered tree trunks, chase sunbeams, and always stop at the creek. Nora used to think he was just drawn to the water, mesmerized by the way the current danced over smooth stones. But on this particular morning, Leo froze. Nora, sipping her coffee on the porch, noticed it right away. He stood at the edge of the creek, rigid, ears up, tail stiff. Then came the sound, a splash, followed by a high-pitched squeal. Nora dropped her mug and ran. By the time she got to the water, Leo was already moving. The small dog dove into the icy creek without hesitation, paddling furiously toward something caught in the current. Nora's eyes searched wildly until she saw it. A small brown rabbit, barely staying afloat, its ears flattened and paws flailing. "Leo, be careful!" she shouted, heart pounding. The water was frigid, even dangerous, fed by melting snow from higher elevations. But Leo didn't stop. With powerful strokes, he closed the gap and reached the rabbit. Carefully, instinctively, he nudged the tiny creature toward the bank, then gently gripped the loose fur of its back with his jaws, careful not to hurt it, and pulled it toward the shore. Nora reached in and scooped them both out, wrapping Leo in her flannel and cradling the shivering rabbit in her hands. It was alive, barely, but breathing. She sat down on the soft earth, adrenaline making her fingers shake. Leo leaned against her leg, watching the rabbit with steady eyes, his body trembling from the cold, but otherwise calm. You saved it," she whispered. The rabbit blinked. Its breathing slowed. For a moment it simply lay there, nestled in Nora's palms, too weak to move but no longer fading. And then something unexpected happened. The rabbit lifted its head and pressed its nose softly against Leo's. Nora's breath caught. It wasn't just gratitude. It felt like recognition, like a moment between two souls that had met somewhere in the unknown. She couldn't explain it, but something passed between them, quiet and undeniable. As she looked out at the water, now calm again, she realized this wasn't just a rescue. It was the start of something. Leo had seen that rabbit before it even cried out. He had felt it. And soon, Nora would discover that Leo's instincts ran far deeper than she ever imagined. What Leo did next would not only reveal a hidden bond, but lead Nora and her French bulldog into a mystery that nature had kept secret for years. By the next morning, Nora expected the rabbit to be gone. She'd made a small bed of towels in a shallow box, left out bits of apple and baby spinach, and placed it on the back porch, assuming the wild creature would slip away into the forest during the night. But when she opened the door at sunrise, there it was, still curled up, eyes wide open, as if waiting. Leo padded out beside her, his tail giving a slow wag. The moment the rabbit saw him, it stood up on shaky legs and hopped forward, not in fear, but with strange familiarity. Nora blinked. "Well, you two have something going on, don't you?" The rabbit nudged Leo gently, then settled beside him, its body pressing into his side. Leo didn't move, didn't flinch. He simply accepted the contact as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Later that morning, Nora called Dr. Mel Garza, the local vet, just to be safe. When she described what had happened, Mel was skeptical. A wild rabbit staying close like that? Not typical. Maybe it's sick or imprinted. "On my dog?" Nora asked. Stranger things have happened. By the time Mel arrived that afternoon, Leo and the rabbit, whom Nora had started calling Willow, were lying side by side in a patch of sun near the porch. Leo's chin rested on his paws, his eyes half closed. Willow sat beside him upright, ears twitching but body completely relaxed. Mel kneeled beside the rabbit, examined her carefully, and checked for injuries. No signs of trauma, heartbeat steady, but she's definitely underweight. Nora nodded. "I've been feeding her. She eats fine, but she won't leave, and she follows Leo everywhere." Mel glanced at the French bulldog, then let out a small laugh. "You got yourself a loyal pair." That night, something even more curious happened. As Nora sat in the living room reading, she heard a scratching sound at the back door. When she opened it, Leo was standing outside, but he wasn't alone. Willow was pawing at the door, frantic. Nora let them in, and the rabbit immediately ran toward the fireplace, circling the hearth like it was looking for something. Leo followed, then stopped, ears alert, head tilted. Suddenly, Leo began barking, short, sharp bursts, not his usual excited bark, but something urgent. Nora stood up. "What is it?" She walked over and crouched down where they were gathered. The rabbit was pawing at a small piece of loose floorboard near the edge of the hearth. Nora pulled it up carefully, and her heart skipped. Beneath the board was a weathered tin box, about the size of a lunch pail. She opened it slowly, revealing yellowed paper, a rusted compass, and a faded black and white photo. The photo was of a young woman, smiling, standing in front of the very same cabin Nora now lived in. Written on the back, in neat handwriting, "Margaret Calloway, summer 1957. You'll always find your way back." Nora sat back, stunned. She had never heard that name before. The realtor never mentioned anyone named Calloway. She felt a chill, not of fear, but of something older, deeper. Connection. History. Leo nosed the box once, then lay down beside it. Willow curled up next to him again, like the discovery had brought them peace. Nora stared at the photo in her hand. What had these two just uncovered? And why did it feel like Leo had known exactly where to look? The next morning, the mist hung low over the treetops, giving the forest an almost sacred stillness. Nora sat at the kitchen table, the tin box open in front of her. The photograph of Margaret Calloway stared back, eyes bright, hair pinned back in a vintage wave, standing proudly in front of the same cabin that now held so many unspoken stories. Leo lay at Nora's feet, ears twitching at every creak in the old wood floor. Willow had made herself a corner by the sliding glass door, watching the forest like a quiet sentry. Nora tapped the edge of the photo. "You two didn't just find this by accident, did you?" She had spent the better part of the night scouring old town records online. Margaret Calloway's name had come up, but only in fragments. An article from 1957 announcing her engagement to a local park ranger. A property listing that showed she once owned this exact parcel of land. And then, nothing. No obituary. No official record of her leaving the area. It was like she vanished. As Nora read deeper, she found something that stopped her cold. A forum thread about unexplained animal behavior near the Columbia River Gorge. One user mentioned a recurring sight: a French bulldog and a rabbit spotted together somewhere, darting in and out of the woods over the past few years. Locals had chalked it up to folklore or misidentification. But Nora was now holding the truth in her hands. She couldn't ignore the thought that Leo had been drawn here for a reason. He'd never been to this place before, but from the moment they arrived, it was like something in him had awakened, like this land remembered him. That afternoon, she drove to the county records office in Hood River. The clerk, an older man named Harold, was surprised when she asked about the Calloway name. "Margaret? That's going way back," he said, flipping through a dusty binder. "Strange case. She was a botanist, if I remember right. Used to walk these woods for hours. Said she could read the forest like a book." "And what happened to her?" Nora asked. Harold hesitated. "They say she went missing one winter. Left behind a journal and a dog that wouldn't stop howling for days." Nora's breath caught. "What kind of dog?" "Small one. Bulldog, I think. People say he stayed by the creek for a week straight. Then he disappeared too." She showed him the photo from the tin box. Harold stared for a long moment. "That's her. No doubt." Nora returned home with her head spinning. She walked into the cabin, dropped her keys, and sank into the chair. Leo looked up at her, sensing something had changed. Willow hopped onto her lap gently, nose twitching. Nora held up the photo again. "This isn't just history. It's repeating." That night she placed the compass from the tin box on the mantel. As the fire crackled, Leo suddenly stood up and began barking, his eyes fixed on the window. Nora turned, and her breath froze in her throat. Just beyond the tree line, barely visible under the moonlight, stood a white rabbit. But not Willow. This one was larger, still, and somehow familiar, like it had been watching them all along. And then, just as suddenly, it disappeared into the woods. Was the forest trying to tell her something? Or had Leo and Willow awakened something long forgotten on this land, something still unfinished? The following morning, the air was heavy with fog, draping the trees in a veil of mystery. Nora stood at the edge of the woods, wrapped in her fleece jacket, the tin box from the fireplace held tightly in one hand. Leo was already at her side, alert, tail low but wagging gently. Willow circled her feet once before pausing, nose to the ground, then hopping toward the trees. Nora had barely slept. Her mind replayed the moment from the night before, the flash of the second rabbit, the piercing silence that followed, and Leo's reaction. He wasn't barking out of fear. It was recognition. Willow darted forward again, but not randomly. Her path curved gently, deliberate, following a narrow animal trail that wound deeper into the forest. Nora took a breath. "All right, you two. Lead the way." They moved in sync, Willow hopping with rhythmic urgency, Leo trotting beside her protectively, and Nora just behind, trying to make sense of her own racing thoughts. The deeper they walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around them. Not menacing, but dense, old, watching. After about 20 minutes, Willow stopped at a clearing surrounded by cedar trees. At its center stood an old stone bench, moss-covered and cracked, but still intact. Behind it, carved into the bark of a massive oak tree, was a single word: return. Nora approached slowly. The compass she'd found in the tin box was now swinging erratically on its chain. Leo began pacing in a circle, occasionally glancing up at the oak as if something, or someone, had been here recently. She walked around the tree and gasped. Tucked in a hollow behind the trunk was a rusted tin journal. She pulled it out, carefully dusting off the debris. Inside, on the first page, written in the same tidy handwriting as on the photo, were the words, "If you found this, then maybe you've felt it too, MC." Nora turned the pages. Most were filled with sketches of plants and notes about soil and sunlight. But further in, the tone changed. There's something different about this land. The animals here don't just survive. They communicate. I've followed rabbits that seem to know where the old medicinal herbs grow. And my dog, Percy, he senses things before they happen. He barked before the last storm even reached the hills. He follows the rabbits like he understands them. Sometimes, I sit in this clearing and feel like I'm not alone, even when nothing stirs. I'm starting to believe this place is a threshold, a thin place between what we know and what we've forgotten. Nora's hands trembled as she turned the last page. I've decided to stay. I don't mean at the cabin. I mean here. If this is where understanding begins, then maybe it's also where healing can finally happen. Suddenly, Leo let out a low whine. He was staring past the clearing, ears up, body still. Nora followed his gaze. Through the mist, just beyond the tree line, a white rabbit stood again, watching them. And then, it turned and ran. Without hesitation, Willow took off after it. Leo didn't wait for a command. He chased too. "Leo! Willow!" Nora shouted, stuffing the journal into her bag and running after them. The woods blurred around her. Branches whipped her arms. The soft crunch of paws ahead urged her forward. She wasn't chasing anymore. She was being led. They came to another opening, smaller, with a shallow stream running through it. Willow and Leo had stopped. At the edge of the water, the white rabbit waited, still as stone. Then, without warning, it turned once more, this time heading upstream. Nora stared after it, chest heaving. The stream cut gently through the trees, its surface rippling with the soft movement of spring runoff. Nora stood at its edge, her boots sinking slightly into the mud, heart thudding in her chest. Leo and Willow were just ahead, alert but hesitant, as if they too sensed that whatever lay beyond would change everything. The white rabbit was gone again. Disappeared into the dense brush upstream. But its path was clear, branches bent just so, paw prints left in soft patches of earth. And something else, too. Symbols. Etched into flat stones near the riverbank were more carvings. Circles with arrows, spirals with dots at their center. Margaret's journal hadn't mentioned these. Nora had never seen them before. They weren't random. They were guiding her. She looked down at Leo, who stared back with steady, intelligent eyes. Willow nudged his shoulder and then hopped forward again, trusting that Leo and Nora would follow. They did. The air grew cooler as they walked, heavier. The birdsong faded, replaced by the sound of wind through pine needles. After nearly an hour of slow hiking, the terrain began to rise, and Nora noticed a sudden shift. Moss growing in strange patterns, tree trunks split as if struck by lightning, but no signs of fire. Then they reached it, a clearing, perfectly circular. At its center, a large stone arch, moss-covered but intact, rising nearly 8 feet tall. It looked ancient, but untouched by time. No ivy climbing it, no erosion. Just standing there, waiting. Leo froze at the base of the arch. Willow sat beside him, still. Nora stepped forward cautiously. The compass she wore around her neck, which had been spinning erratically earlier, was now completely still, its needle locked straight ahead, toward the arch. Etched across the top of the stone were 5 words. Only those who remember stay. She turned to Leo. He was trembling slightly, but not from fear, from energy. As if every cell in his body recognized this place. He let out a soft whimper and looked at her. "No," Nora said gently, already understanding. "Not you, too." Leo stepped forward, touching his nose to the base of the arch. The air shimmered faintly. A warm breeze passed over Nora's face despite the stillness of the forest. Willow hopped forward, stopped beneath the arch, and vanished. Nora gasped. She lunged forward. There was no sound, no light, no disruption in space. Just empty air where the rabbit had been. "Leo, don't," she whispered. But Leo turned to her with the deepest, most heartbreaking look she had ever seen. He wasn't afraid. He was saying goodbye. He barked once, a short, soft sound, and stepped through the arch. Gone. Nora stumbled forward, crying out, hands trembling. "Leo!" Nothing. The forest held its breath. She stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then she fell to her knees, hands pressed against the mossy ground, overwhelmed. But just as despair began to take over, she heard something. A low rustle, a sound like paws on earth. She looked up. Leo stepped back through the arch, alive, whole, and not alone. Following behind him was another rabbit, older, white, calm. And Nora realized, this one was in the photograph with Margaret. Leo walked toward her and gently laid something at her feet. It was a pendant, silver, shaped like a small spiral, exactly like the ones etched on the stones. Nora picked it up, tears streaking her face. "You found her, didn't you?" Leo didn't answer, of course, but he sat down beside her, pressed his head into her lap, and sighed. Whatever mystery the arch held, it had let him come back. Because she had to know. Because it wasn't finished yet. But now the question wasn't what Leo had discovered. It was what Nora would do with the truth. The arch disappeared behind them like a memory, solid and silent, yet somehow fading the moment Nora, Leo, and the white rabbit stepped beyond its circle. The return walk through the woods felt lighter, as if some unseen weight had lifted from the air itself. The breeze was warmer, the shadows softer. Even the sound of distant birds seemed more vibrant, more aware. Nora barely spoke. She didn't have to. Leo stayed close to her side, his steps steady, deliberate. But there was something different about him now. His body still moved like a dog, but his gaze held something else, a knowing, a depth that wasn't there before. And the rabbit, Margaret's rabbit, she now knew, followed without hesitation. It made no attempt to flee, no sign of fear, just silent trust. When they arrived back at the cabin, the sun had dipped low over the pines, casting long gold lines across the porch. Willow, who had vanished through the arch, was waiting. She hopped out from under the porch and ran to greet them, nuzzling the older rabbit instantly, circling her like a child welcoming home a parent. Nora stepped onto the porch and turned to Leo. "You came back," she whispered, kneeling to meet his eyes. "But not just for me." Leo blinked slowly, then placed a paw gently on the pendant still hanging from her neck. That night, Nora sat on the floor by the fireplace, both rabbits curled near the hearth, Leo lying with his head across her feet. She opened Margaret's journal again, this time reading slowly, letting each word settle deep inside her. The notes weren't just observations. They were a map, a guide to understanding the unseen. This land is a conduit. The animals that stay here, those who choose to stay, carry memory. They're protectors, messengers, and sometimes guides. Over the next few days, things began to change. It started with the birds. They stopped gathering near the roads and power lines. Instead, they flocked to the clearing by the creek. Then came the deer, moving closer to homes, but never causing damage. Just watching. One morning, the local mail carrier, a woman named Rhina, knocked on Nora's door holding a newspaper. "There's something strange going on," she said, eyes wide. "People are saying they've seen pairs of animals, rabbits and dogs, coyotes and foxes, moving together, not hunting, just traveling." Nora invited her in. She listened quietly, letting the town's stories unfold. Cats that disappeared into the forest and returned days later, calmer, more alert. A child who claimed a raccoon showed him a path home after he got lost near the trailhead. An elderly man with memory issues who swore a hawk had circled him until he found his way back. "I know how it sounds," Rena said, "but it's not just stories anymore. It's a pattern." Nora sipped her tea, then smiled gently. "They're remembering," she said softly, "and they're showing us how to do the same." That evening, Leo sat at the edge of the forest, eyes scanning the trees. Willow and the older rabbit sat beside him, as still as statues. Nora joined them, sitting cross-legged in the grass, letting the dusk wrap around her like an old blanket. She reached out and rested her hand on Leo's back. "I don't think this place is just a home," she said. "I think it's a passage, for healing, for legacy, maybe even for love." Leo didn't move, but she felt him sigh. And when she looked into the trees, she no longer feared what she didn't understand. Because now, she believed. A month had passed since Leo returned through the arch, and nothing in Nora's life looked quite the same. The forest, once quiet in a familiar sort of way, now thrummed with presence, with meaning. Birds moved in patterns she could read. Small animals paused to make eye contact, like checking in. Willow had become a constant shadow, never far from Leo, while the older rabbit, whom Nora had taken to calling Margaret, remained close to the clearing, like a guardian watching from the past. The pendant Nora wore never grew cold. When she touched it, she often felt a hum, as if it remembered something before her mind could grasp it. And Leo was changing in ways that defied logic. He still wagged his tail when she came home, still snored like a freight train when curled up on her bed. But in the forest, he became something else. He no longer barked at deer. He moved with them. When hikers passed too close to the grove near the arch, he stood between them and the trees, firm, quiet, like a sentinel. And when Nora followed him into the woods, he always led her to places she'd never seen, always somehow arriving at the exact moment a wounded bird fell, or a lost dog howled, or a storm threatened an old tree. It wasn't instinct anymore. It was purpose. Word had begun to spread in town. Not fear, curiosity, reverence. Locals brought injured wildlife to Nora's door. Children came by to leave fruit for Willow. People even stopped walking their dogs near the arch after a hiker claimed their pup froze in place and refused to cross its shadow. Nora had a decision to make. One morning she packed a bag, slung her camera around her neck, and brought Margaret's journal with her. She walked with Leo deep into the grove, to the stone arch, and sat beside it. "I know why you came back," she whispered to Leo. "You're not just a pet. You're a bridge. You brought her story to life. And now, you're part of what keeps this alive." Leo rested his head on her knee. The white rabbit appeared across the clearing and sat down calmly. A moment passed where everything was still, beyond still, sacred. Then Nora stood. She took a deep breath and said the words aloud. "I'm not going back." She gave up her nursing license, sold what remained of her old life, and turned the cabin into something else. Not a sanctuary, not a shelter, a haven, a place where people could come and reconnect. With nature, with silence, with the truths we all forget as we grow old and scared. She didn't advertise it, but people found it anyway. Word of mouth, whispered stories, a woman and her French bulldog who knew how to help you remember. One evening, a little girl came with her parents. She had lost her voice after a traumatic accident. As the sun set, Leo padded up beside her, silent and still. The girl reached out and touched his back, and smiled. She didn't say a word, but she didn't need to, because she believed. And that was enough. Nora sat on the porch that night, watching the wind ripple through the trees. Leo was curled beside her, the pendant around her neck warm against her chest. "You brought us back," she whispered. Leo's ear twitched. "Not just me, all of us." The arch still stood. But now Nora understood it wasn't meant for escaping life. It was meant for stepping deeper into it. And Leo, small, wrinkled, unassuming Leo, was its gatekeeper. A French bulldog who saved a rabbit, and in doing so saved a legacy. If this story inspired you, remember, courage and loyalty can overcome any distance, between species, between people, between worlds. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes in second chances and in the healing power of connection.